So for this lesson, we will be discussing quite a bit about set notation. So you are going to be expected to be able to state valid domain and range for functions throughout the year this year, especially as we look at different types of functions. So the first step to doing that is knowing the differences between the three types of notation that we use. And to get there, there's a few things that we definitely need to review. So first of all, what is a set? So a set is a collection of values or a list of elements. When you have seen domain and range just list values, that is what you have been doing. So you can have any number of elements in a set. It could actually be written as like a continuous portion. So it can also be something like -1 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 7, because it'll take care of all of those values. It can also be empty and expressed just as empty brackets, or you can have just that null symbol inside of those brackets as well. We have two types of sets. So you have the discrete set, which is just the list of values. So you can just list them, or you can even list it as dots on a graph. Now, a continuous set is going to cover a range of values. So that is like -2 is less than x, which is less than 4, because it's going to cover everything between 2 and 4. On the graph, you are going to have little to no breaks. You're not going to have dots. Even if you do have a break in the graph, you have to account for those missing values in your notation. So there's three ways that we can note a continuous set. We can do it algebraically, and that is the way that you are probably most familiar with, because it just looks like an inequality. Sometimes you do have to note different sets, so you have to like write an or statement. The one that's going to be newest to you is going to be interval notation. This is also the one that you are going to most commonly use. And in fact, we are going to reach a point where if it doesn't say what notation to use, you want to use interval notation. And then last but not least, we have set builder notation. This is probably the least used notation that there is, but it does look a lot like an inequality. So it looks like a lot like the algebraic notation, just with some extra things added to it. So let's go ahead and talk about the interval notation. So interval notation is used for noting both what we call bounded and unbounded intervals. So bounded intervals have an endpoint. And so we have 4 different types. We have bounded intervals that you can actually touch the values on each end. And so you will use a bracket on each side of the interval to show that you can touch each. Then you have intervals where you cannot touch either side. So you have an empty circle on the number line. And so you would actually use a parenthesis on each side. Then you could possibly touch at the lower end and then not touch at the higher end. So the lower end, or essentially A, would get a bracket in front of it, and then you would have a parenthesis after B. And then the fourth type is when you cannot actually include your A value, which is your lower value, but you can include your B. So that would be a parenthesis in front of your A and then a bracket after B. And then your unbounded intervals, this is where you can continue without end in one direction or the other. So to show which side goes on forever, you will use either infinity or negative infinity. So if you can go to the right forever or up forever when dealing with range, then you are going to use a positive infinity with a parenthesis after it because you cannot touch infinity. Then if you go down forever, you are going to use that negative infinity symbol to show that you go down. And of course, if you continue forever in both directions, then you will use negative infinity to positive infinity. So note that bounded intervals have a number on each side. So I use a bracket, you use parentheses, or you use a mix of the two. And then the unbounded intervals will have an arrow in the inequality or the graph, a variable on one side, or they will have absolutely no limit and you have to use an infinity symbol. So let's go ahead and give this a try. So we have on A, -2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than or equal to 3. So this is a bounded interval because you have a number on each side of it. And then your low side is -2, so we always list it first. And since it's less than or equal to, this means that we can include that -2, so it gets a bracket. Then we can go up to 3, and we can also include it, and so it gets a bracket as well. Then we have x is greater than -1. So since x is greater, -1 is my lower value. So it is what I am going to start with. Now I do not have an or equal to underneath it, so I can use a parenthesis and then I can go up forever. So I am going to use infinity on the left side because I don't have a limit on how far I can go up. Then on C, we have a number line. And so our low value is -3. So I'm going to start there. That circle is filled in, so I know I can include -3. And then I can go all the way up to 4 for my high value. Now I can't include 4 since that circle is empty, so it gets a parenthesis. And then for D, I go down forever. So I'm going to use a negative infinity and a parenthesis. Then we can go all the way up to a +3, and then that circle is included, so it gets a bracket. All right, so now I want you to go ahead and pause the video and give 1 through 3 right here a try. And then hit play when you're finished to check your answers. Okay, so we should have started with -7 since it's the lower value, and use a parenthesis because we do not have the or equal to. We can go all the way up to -4. We also cannot touch it, so it gets a parenthesis. Then we go to number 2, and x is less than or equal to 5. So we have no limit to how far we can go down, so that gets a negative infinity. And then we can go up to 5. We can include the 5, so it gets a bracket. And then on number 3, we have -2, which gets a bracket. And then it goes up forever. So that gets infinity and a parenthesis. All right, so with set builder notation, this looks like algebraic notation, which is just the inequality with some extra things on it. So you have your statement where you have your brace, and then you have x, and then a big line, which means is such that, And then you have your inequality where x is less than b, or whatever that might be. So you can have notation where you have a break in the number line. And so you have the inequality for the first piece, like x is less than or equal to a. And then you have an inequality for the second piece, which is x is greater than b. And they're separated by or. So, or shows the break. And then we will discuss here in a minute how to handle that when you have interval notation. You can also have like x is not equal to a value if you have just one value that is left out. Sometimes we will go ahead and show this with 2 or 3, but typically you would do this with just one value. So let's go ahead and look at A here, where we need to sketch the graph of each set of numbers. So we have x is such that 2 is less than x, which is less than or equal to 5. So we are going to draw a number line. So we can go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we are going to go ahead and put a circle on 2. And we will not fill it in because we have no or equal to. And then we're going to go to 5, and we are going to fill in that circle because we have the or equal to underneath it. Then we're going to draw a line in between. And then on B, we have an or statement. So we're going to have 2 sections on our number line. And then we have -1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And we have a filled in circle on 0. And then we are going to go down because it is less than. And then at 4, we're going to have another circle that is not filled in because we have no line underneath, but then we are going to go up and go to the right. So we have this break in between, and that's shown by the or. All right, so then how do you handle those discontinuous intervals when you have interval notation? Well, you're going to use a U in between your intervals. So you will write an interval for each piece. So for this first example here, we have a number line that is going down from -3. So we're going to write an interval for just that arrow. So we'll have -infinity because we go down forever. And it goes to -3, so that also gets a parenthesis. And then we're going to use a big U. This is called a union of sets. And then we go up to 0. That's a filled in circle. And then that goes all the way up to 4. That's filled in as well. So both 0 and 4 get a bracket. So then for our next example, we have 3 pieces. So we will have 3 separate intervals. So we will have a -infinity because it does go down forever, and it goes all the way up to -4. And then it gets a bracket. Then we have U. And then that's going to go up to -1. That gets a bracket. And then that goes over to a +1, which gets a parenthesis. So then we skip over to 2. So we're going to have a U again because we haven't break in that graph. and then we are going to go from 2 all the way up to infinity from there. So that also gets a parenthesis.